where all that's going culturally, what some of the possibilities are. Also on the panel we have Bazanov. Am I pronouncing it in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
Okay. He's an experienced software engineer and architect, and he's the founder of information security company Log Sentinel. His interests go beyond day-to-day software development into the areas of scientific inquiry, including, cryptography, algorithmic music, linguistics. He is a creative computoser, an algorithmic composer. He is also a former IT advisor and deputy of Prime Minister of Bulgaria. These would be our two major panelists. Can we give them a hand? And let's see, I got one other gentleman here. Who am I leaving out? Jack. Jack, do we have your introduction here? Where?
It's on the back.
Oh, so you must not be a big deal. They put you in the back. Yeah. Okay. So the way we do this is last but not least. How do you pronounce the last name? Charnello. We have Jack Charnello. We got a chance to meet Jack down at Youngstown State University. We burst in right in the middle of one of his classes, and he was courteous enough to accept our invitation to come down and help us put this panel on, so we appreciate it much. Jack is the owner of Techno Productions in Youngstown, Ohio. He's a composer, and he arranges soundtracks for radio and television. He creates musical backgrounds for video presentations. So Jack has a deep, just listening to Jack talk, he has a deep music background and technical background. So it seems like we have a pretty good panel to tackle some of these things. So let's give Jack a hand also. And so we're going to have the panelists, and you guys are going to come up. Yeah, we got to put you up on the stage here. So will Boz be able to see Jack? Yeah, I guess.
Well, if he has eyes in the back of his computer.
Yeah. Okay.
I can turn my screen.
Okay, Boz, who would you rather see? Would you rather see the audience or the two panelists?
It's currently frozen anyway, so I see.
Yeah. So we can see you. We're moving on our side. We can see you moving just fine. But on your side, the picture is frozen.
Yeah.
Is it a bandwidth thing? Probably.
Yeah. That's no problem.
Right. And so.
Great. So.
Right. And so because you're so far away, I want you to start off giving the audience a little bit about yourself and your research.
Well, as you first, thank you for inviting me here. And I'm not an actual scientist, obviously. I'm a software engineer, more on the practical end. But a couple of years ago, it's now 6, 7 or 7, I had this idea that maybe the current state of the art in algorithmic music isn't good enough. And I decided to kind of help it improve, with no matter how optimistic that was, let's say. And that's why I approached it in the software engineering way. Of course, went through all of the research, both computational research as well as musical research and theory. Read a lot of books, studied a lot of authors, and then I created this computoser, which is able to generate, in some cases, music that you can listen to without banging your head against the wall. So unfortunately, after I published a paper on that, describing just my approach there, I stopped doing much about that. I was getting back to it a little bit, back and forth, but my day-to-day activities kind of drifted away from computational composition, but I'm still reading what's coming up, and I'm still interested in the topic, just didn't have the time to actively improve myself.
Okay, great, thank you. And if you could just, I know we've heard from you, but we had some more people come in, so if you want to just share a quick introduction to your aspect of the interface with artificial intelligence in your music. I know you do Audacity. Just a quick kind of introduction for that.
Okay. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm Roger Dannenberg. I'm computer science faculty at Carnegie Mellon, and lately I've been working on getting computers to compose pop music for, actually the application is music therapy for Parkinson's patients, and I guess our main goal is, I like this expression, music you can listen to without banging your head into the wall. So, you know, that's kind of our aspiration in this area. I also wrote or co-authored a book called, I forgot the title, something like Composing Music with Computers.
Let's not get much royalties behind that.
Yeah, it's University of Michigan Press. It's an academic book, but yeah, so that's basically it.
I think my approach, Jack Charnell, and I teach adjunct down at YSU, and our music recording degree program is hosted under the auspices of the Danish School of Music. And so the students that are majoring in the field, they actually have to have a declared musical instrument or voice or something like that. So we're very much a specific music school with an emphasis in technology. And so the approach that I'm looking at, the thing that got me interested in the first place was we're always trying to promote the human aspect. You know, why should somebody spend 5-6 hours a day in a practice room when the computer might be able to do just as good a job? You know, what is that motivation? What is that tie? And so what I'm looking at is I'm looking at being able to discern the difference between AI, weak AI or strong AI, and what a human being actually brings to that, you know, brings to the party. And so trying to discern these differences, we get into intellectual property rights, things like that, as far as, you know, this brave new world that we're entering into. And so that's kind of the approach that I'm taking from it is, you know, where do human beings fit into this picture, because AI is improving. By its very nature, it's going to possibly one of these days want to improve on its own. And, you know, so.
Well, let me quickly, because you threw a couple terms in there. You mentioned the term weak AI and strong AI, so I'm going to try to police some of these things. I spent a lot of time in AI research, and so one of the goals of strong AI was to try to get computers to imitate the way human beings do things. So the people that are trying to do strong AI, a simplified definition of that is, I want to have the computer do what you do the way you do it. And the people in the weak AI, they want to accomplish the same goals that human beings do, but not necessarily the way that human beings do it. So that's like a simplified version. And we really want to ask, one of our questions that we're trying to ask today and get answered today is, where does this AI, this artificial intelligence capability take us with respect to putting musicians out of work, putting artists out of work, putting filmmakers out of work? But I want to ask a question of the panel before we get started. Some of the original European composers, in the process of composing music, they work with systems. They work with rules. You know, the scales have rules. You know, if I have a dominant, you know, note, it wants to go to the tonic, and the subdominant wants to do this, right? And so, you know, the music theory of some of our classical composers was a system, and there were algorithms involved. You know, so guys like Beethoven, sort of composers would sit down. They were not computers necessarily, but they were following rules of that music theory system. And so, how is, I guess my first question is, how is what they're doing when they were following those rules to automatically create music, how is that any different than the artificial intelligence, the composer music that follows rules, follows musical rules to create composition? How is that different? Anyone in the panel?
Well, I'll jump in. First of all, I would not say they were following the rules to generate music. I would say they were following rules in their compositional practice. But I'd like to make a distinction between analytical systems, let's say, that you look at the music and you observe that yeah, there are keys, maybe a dominant chord is likely to be followed by a tonic, and so on, when you're doing analysis. And then there are generative theories that are so specific, they actually tell you what you should do instead of looking back and tell you what you did. I think most music theory has been analytic, and there's very little generative music theory.
I guess, let me throw back into that. What then, if I want to include things like song form, the rondos, the allegrettos, the satinas, those things have certain forms, so many measures. We're gonna do this in this form for so many measures, then we're gonna come back and we're gonna do this. And at a certain point, it almost seems like a composer could just take the form as a template, you know, the musical form, and just generate, you know, start, you know, pick a note, and you tell me the form. And how is that not music generation if the form is telling you where to go next?
Well,
from rules.
So that is, so I would agree that those are kind of generative aspects of the theory, but there's so much missing. I mean, it's not sufficient. Those rules and even the kind of generative prescriptions are not sufficient to actually complete a piece of music. So, for example, you could do rondo form, but what if you always play C major? You know, you know, would be on your way to generating In C by Terry Riley, but even there, you know, there's a whole lot of form there that's anyway.
Right, but you know, and I don't want to go down in the rabbit hole too into the weeds so far to talk about the sonatic song form. But there are many, from a music theory point of view, it can be very mechanical. And the question is, after you know, following something like sonatic form, if you know, one of the criticisms is that, you know, it can just be bland, and so it doesn't seem alive, right? It's like some of the criticisms that we get for the algorithmic music, and I guess that's where I'm trying to go. A lot of the original classical forms, they were really some of the fugues, you know, like, you know, some of the stuff that Bach was doing, it's very dry kind of stuff from an emotional point of view, but it's very much just pattern based. You know, not
well, but I take sonata form, so part of that, you know, generative prescription is development.
Yes.
So how do you operationalize development? You know, that's a very creative act that I don't think we have any theory that tells us how to do it.
So I get you're saying that it's more than just music theory, Jackie.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that if we look at procedural generation, you know, even you had mentioned in graphics, yes. The long and the short of it is that we can throw that's reiteration itself, an iterative formula, and have a computer go ahead and run, because they can run hundreds of thousands of these things so quickly, and generate color and placement. We can do the same thing with music, but when the composer is following a sonata form or creating a fugue based on rules of thematic approach and stuff, the one difference is, and this is even getting beyond strong AI, the difference is the composer writes those notes down based on a preliminary set of rules, but they don't stop writing notes until they like it. I like this melody, and when I do, there's potential that other people are going to also. There's that human test that I could write here, based on a formula, but I'm going to write here because I like the way that sounds.
Okay, Boz, so you hear what Jack is saying. So can't we just have an objective goal for your algorithm, right? That says, when it gets to the point where the melody or harmony is reaching this point, the algorithm expresses happiness, have like a belief, desires, and intentions kind of model for the design of the algorithm, where the AI agent is happy with the results of what he's producing.
Yeah, well, actually, this is exactly what I was about to say. What Jack said, that the algorithm can generate millions of records, but it cannot judge them as a human. And now, obviously, you could, for example, train a neural network that has the experience of many listeners poured into its training, and then it would assess the quality of the music, but that would still be biased. And it could be, for example, biased to the taste of this subgroup of people that were used for training. For example, Western music, it's particularly nice to our ear, but there are other cultures where other even scales exist, obviously. And you could either train the neural network to be a listener that resembles one of these cultures, or it could be a generic listener. And that's, I'm not sure if there are experiments in that direction, so to train the neural network to be a listener of either the culture or a general listener, because I like the scales and the music of other cultures, but some, for example, even my peers don't. And this particular personal taste is something that is more culturally influenced rather than innate. Maybe that's not the question. And I'm not sure if you could pour that much information to the neural network. Maybe you can.
Well, it almost seems like you all are trying to say that there is some aspect of the way human beings compose music that cannot be easily duplicated by computers, and I really want to challenge that. I'd be the devil's advocate here. When you look at top 40 music per se, that music is very formalized. There's templates. The industry has templates. This is what it is going to be for a top 40 hit, a Billboard hit. This is what it looks like. This is what the orchestration is going to be. It's going to be exactly 3 point, so many minutes long, and they just bring artists in and produce these top 40 hits all the time. And these things are very template, and they seem to me to be very algorithmic. So why couldn't we get computers to do precisely that? Like there in Roger's earlier presentation, he showed us a computer that was able to produce a pop chart kind of a song. They're very formulaic. So how come the AI can't get us there?
I think it can. I mean, not all of these top 40 are actually very great pieces. They become something. But some of them are so generic that they will be forgotten in a few years' time. So even that said, a couple of them are good music, and they can be recreated by AI. The question is how many other bad pieces will be generated, how they'll be judged. And then, this is a distinction that I always like to make. There's the human touch in music in three aspects. One is the composition, obviously what we're talking about, but the other ones are performance and actually listening to and experiencing it. And I think that the most human thing that you could possibly hardly replace is the listening part. You could obviously replace posers, some of them at least, and performers, but the way that the person accepts and listens to the music will be different, and that will still even AI music still not lose necessarily a human touch. And speaking of classical composers, Mozart not only used some formulas to compose music, he also had this dice game, I think, where he just wrote little pieces of music and then threw dice and then recombined them. And some of the early computer algorithms for composing music, and even some existing ones that are popular on Play Store or something, are using this approach. They have a lot of samples and they just recombine them in a friendly way, just like Mozart did just with computers.
Wow. Okay.
Hello, this is Julius Flango, and I wanted to sort of phrase the question off of what Baz had mentioned concerning the AI and, bias. And I think what I'd like to hear is your guys' feedback about the idea that, at least I'm not a big AI person, but when I think of training and data sets, you're teaching patterns, you're teaching like bases of knowledge. And so if I'm, the big example like I like to think of is like when you look at Google and they trained it on dogs. And all of a sudden you give it a picture of clouds. And all of a sudden now there's dogs in all the clouds because that's all that AI network knew was dogs, and you give it clouds. So there's definitely like bias, right? This thing's biased towards dogs. It sees dogs everywhere. And so there's that aspect, and then the other aspect is that, unfortunately, when you train something on a data set, that data set is stagnant that way. It might feed in more stuff as you give it a new thing, but it's totally limited by that, whereas humans, we live in the world, and we experience all kinds of things, and we're always taking that in, so our tastes might change, but if you keep giving me computer-generated music that's stuck on top 40 genre, how does it ever decide what the next big thing is? I mean, I think we talked earlier about getting the TR-909s and the 808s and stuff, and it failed, but then success for a whole new genre of music. I worry that, are we going to lose something if we don't use these as tools instead of letting them just run music? Anyways, I'd like to hear your feedback.
Yeah, I'd like to repeat an idea, and I can't remember where this came from, but I think it's a really great example to think about. So, like a very kind of standard machine learning thing to do in music is take some corpus of music and feed it into some sequence learning algorithm that would predict the next note, and then you just kind of run this thing and predict a bunch of notes and generate some music. Okay, and I mean, we could talk about why that's a dumb idea, but there are lots of people doing it, and it seems like that's what is No, the Ava thing, and I just, before I go on, but I just want to say regarding this Ava thing that, I don't know about you, but my bullshit detectors, we're going off left and right, and I mean, we could say some specific stuff, but I hope people are not just accepting that as factual or scientific or anything else, because
which was the point of that.
I think extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and a nice video of a guy showing his green text scrolling on the screen like the Matrix does not make any of that stuff real. But getting back to the point, yeah, recording, taking a corpus, feeding it in, and then trying to generate something. So let's say, you know, for example, we take the complete transcriptions of Charlie Parker from the Charlie Parker book. I forgot what it's called. Maybe it's the Charlie Parker book. But anyway, this is stuff that's published and transcribed. And so you feed all that in, and you say, okay, I'm going to generate some more of Charlie Parker. But think about it. When Charlie Parker first wrote or composed Scrapple from the Apple or any other great bop classic, did Charlie Parker have the complete works of Charlie Parker to base that on? No. He was, you know, none of that stuff existed, and yet he was able to do it. So there's some huge disconnect between this idea of I'm going to play something like Charlie Parker by recording everything that Charlie Parker did. You know, Charlie Parker's dead. It's over. You know, and so you know, I don't even know what's well. It's interesting scientifically to go back and say, well, maybe I could generate something like this, but it has sort of nothing to do with what Charlie Parker was actually doing when he wrote that music.
Maybe you want to finish Beethoven's Unfinished Symphony or something.
Well, but do you do that by trying to learn all the stuff that he, you know, Beethoven's First Symphony, which he more or less rejected and moved from classical to romantic? I mean, he invented he sort of invented the Romantic period. So, you know, how would he have completed some unfinished work had he lived beyond the Romantic period?
I was always taught to start a question with a joke. DOS is good, Fensters is bad. That's German for Windows are bad. Okay. Charlie Parker, real quick on him. A lady one time transcribed one of his solos, and she took it to the Cotton Club to have him play it. And she handed it to him. She said, "Would you play this for me?" And he went, "No." She goes, "When you played it a couple months ago?" And he goes, "Yes, that's right. I played it a couple months ago, and I will play it again." So the confusion is right there. The question I had was, we started off in church music with nice triads. Then we went to devil's triads. Then we went to diminished chords and people running out of the churches in fear. We started at 380, we're at 383, a low pitch now, and we're around 440. We're up at 441, 443, 445, I think. What do you see happening? Are we going to have brand new instruments that are off the charts? Are we going to keep changing? Because we're changing naturally without computers. We're going up in pitch, and we're getting more distant. What do you see the computers doing?
Well, I mean, I think the place to start is look at what's happened in, you know, outside of the classical mainstream in the last 50 to 100 years. And I mean, one of the big trends has been music more based on texture than on pitch. I think a lot of modern composers, and I guess I'm not one of them, but many electroacoustic music composers, I think have decided that you know, we exhausted, just like we exhausted triads and we moved beyond. Now we've just exhausted pitch and we've exhausted rhythm. So let's explore timbre and texture as another expressive medium. So I mean, that's an example. I guess you could also look at microtonal music. We look at a focus on interaction as opposed to composition, and just maybe electronic sounds in general as kind of an extension of tradition in the orchestra. So I don't know. Those are all some ideas.
You know, I still want to challenge you all, because I think what all of you have done so far is you've all given examples of, I think, the extreme case where it's really hard for the computer or the algorithms to meet up, and you're talking about the most creative end. But we have a lot of music that's functional, like funeral music. You know, what you play at a funeral. Some wedding music is very functional. Some war, you know, the music you know, the songs you sing for wartime, very mechanical, and so. Might it be that we are trying to worry too much about Charlie Parker, right? And let's just focus on real basic stuff. You know, the guys that have funeral homes, right? you know, they need to play music all of the time, right? Why would I have to pay the intellectual property to broadcast someone's funeral music throughout my chain of funeral homes when I can just have an AI that creates acceptable funeral music? I mean, who's going to care, right? I'm sad or whatever it is. I'm not going to be looking at something that's very creative. Let me get Boz in first for a minute. Looks like he wants to say something.
Yeah, I was just about to say that you could always play Mozart on funerals and that would be fine. But my point is that I think AI can help composers a lot rather than replace them. Obviously, they could replace the generic composer that doesn't bring new creativity anyway. It's, for example, his side job or something like that. But in general, it could help composers in a very even simplistic ways, like a button on the screen saying "generate me now a new theme that is sad." And I think that will show on the video. And then you generate a sad piece that is suitable for funerals. Then he decides whether it fits his idea of what's going on to happen or it doesn't. And then he regenerates another one, and then now it fits. And it could be a very helpful tool for composers. And for example, even the pieces that the composer, my algorithm generates, they're obviously not good as full pieces, but in some cases they have very nice themes. And you could just get that theme and play with it. And that, I think, can be a useful tool for composers. I'll just go back to the AI and the training set topic that was touched earlier. This is the general limitation of AI today. It needs a lot more data than the human brain needs to train, to recognize something or produce something. And I think we haven't cracked that problem yet. Our AI still need to be fed the world of data, whereas a human child just needs a few examples and then gets it.
Yeah, I follow there, but when you talk about the human child and you compare it to the AI, the human cognition has had, hundreds of thousands of years to evolve. So you're kind of not comparing apples to apples here. Yeah, the implication is that, well, a child can do this so quickly, but a child is a result of, maybe a million years of evolution from a cultural point of view. And so this is transmitted in part by our DNA. People who are sort of famous linguists. I know you have linguistics in your background. Some of the famous linguists say that our language structures are part of our human cognition, and we're born with them. And I suspect that the same may be true in some musical sense, that this is not something that we just learn, from the day that we're born, and as toddlers we first learn with music. I think there's a biological component here, and so to be fair to AI, you would have to be able to talk about AI that has had enough man years to be able to be on par with a child, if you follow what I mean. I think we're giving AI a bad rap. It's able to accomplish a great deal considering how long we've been trying to do this. Yeah, then again, the neural networks, at least originally the idea was to replicate the human apparatus in the brain. Obviously they don't do that exactly the way it works in the brain. But we could try to replicate the apparatus that has evolved rather than trying to evolve it from the very beginning. Yes, that is exactly do you guys have any comment on that there? If you follow where we're going.
I just wanted to make mention of what you were talking about as far as we're always going to need funeral music, and
that's right.
What difference?
Functional music, right?
I would say that something that is really a danger to us, especially in positions where we're attempting to lead into the future, I kind of call it the democratization of mediocrity.
Right.
Basically what happens is that, will there be a place for AI-generated music? And the long and the short of it is that if I were to take 100 people and sequester them in a room and feed them music that has been composed by AI at this stage of AI development and teach them and give them no other choice, then if we give them good sounding sound sets of instruments and melodies that are pleasing based on machine learning, then this becomes their good.
So what you're saying at this point is that it's a matter of culture anyway. So if I take a bunch of millennials that typically don't listen to, you know, even though millennials here, right? They don't listen to quality music in the first place.
I don't want to say, you know, quality, because we've talked about, Debussy, we've talked about Beethoven, and we've talked about Bird. And I'm not saying that one of those is or isn't. All I'm saying is that, is there an intangible difference between the AI composed and, say for instance, how about if you gave a human being, I'm going to challenge you to compose a piece of music that an AI composer would compose.
Yeah, and just switch it.
Would I be able to do it?
Right. But I guess the acceptance on the cultural, us accepting the AI with culture, there's a similar phenomenon that is going on with horror movies. Let's say back in the 50s, what would scare you? You know, if you went to a movie theater, what would scare you is different than what scares people in the 60s. And what scares the people, say in 2018, people from the 70s or 80s, they aren't scared by it. So it's a different cultural sensibility. So the question is, if I grow up listening to artificially intelligent, composed music, won't that be my normal? And why would I even care about the creativity of Mozart or any of the rest of them when I'm just happy with a, you know, a 6809 or 68,000 microprocessor that has you know, XYZ algorithms? You know, what makes us think that it won't be the case that some set of algorithms will be more acceptable to a certain generation than the human composers? Why do we think that's not the case? Boz, do you have a point there?
I actually agree with you. I mean, if you train your musical taste with a particular genre or approach to generating music, then they will be pretty fine with it, and they will find it nice and cool. Now, whether it could generate music that I don't know how to say that can get them, that can get them moving or something like that. There's a nice quote by Leonard Bernstein who said about Beethoven that he was writing every note as if he was on a direct line with God. So he knew what notes should follow. And this is related to the fact that in writing good music, you should always follow rules, but then you should also break rules. And you should know when to break these rules in order to make music non-generic and non-shallow and cold. And obviously the simplest approach is just throwing some random breaking rules, which I did, but that obviously doesn't look great. The question is, can AI generate things that break the rules in exactly such a way that it makes them genius? And I'm not sure that this can be predicted. This is the creative aspect.
Well, Jack brought up the notion that the music process, the creation, is the person is creating, and this, I think you also mentioned this as well, it's also the part of the listener. The listener plays a part in this, so it's the creator, the listener. But I just might wonder from this audience, would you guys care whether it was composed by a computer or AI, as long as it's good? Would that be okay? Anybody against?
Sonically, I wouldn't care.
You wouldn't care. It's just,
But if sonically I wouldn't care, but if I love the music, I think I would investigate more on, is this automated or if a real person.
okay, how old is this young lady right here? This little one?
10.
She's 10. You would listen to computer music at all? Would you care whether the computer made up the music versus a person? So you would rather listen to a person making up the music? Or you don't care? You're just too shy to tell us, right? Right? That's it.
But what about the people who want to create? I think that's sort of the other part of the equation, is we're talking about being the consumers of music. It's computer generated. But as people, we're creative. And it's one thing to listen to music, it's a whole other one to create. And in that side of it, you know, if you let computers generate music and you feel like you can't use that for your own personal fulfillment, then because computers can do it way better, then what good is that? And also on top of that, if you're a composer and you create and people enjoy what you create, that's rewarding in itself. I don't think we teach rewards to computers. I don't think they're driven the same way people are. So I sort of feel like we would want to look at both sides of that, and maybe that's where composers.
See, Boz and Roger, they both, in one way or another, made the suggestion that we don't know whether algorithms could make a genius breakthrough. Here's something that's truly considered genius. And I guess what I'm proffering right now is that genius is a culturally relative term. And the point that you're making is that it seems like the standard for what's quality music is going down. And so who's to say that algorithmic improvisation won't be considered genius by a certain generation of new music listeners. I mean, maybe for a previous generation that is accustomed to certain cultural norms and idiosyncrasies and idiosyncrasies, that they have a certain expectation of what's good or bad. But a new generation might have new standards, and the algorithms may meet those standards, and you might not need human beings to make music because the algorithms serve the purpose that community wants. No?
One thing I would just like to throw in is this notion of composition is very non-specific. So a lot of at least current research on composition is thinking in terms of notes, rhythms, pitches, but that pretty much ignores music performance as part of music creation, and even if you include that, you're ignoring music production, which is in modern music, popular music or film. The production side, what I mean by production is what happens in the studio. People reworking things, people doing processing, audio signal processing. It's a whole art form, and it has radical implications on what the music actually sounds like. It's sort of the modern day orchestration. These classical composers control the way things sound, in part by deciding what instruments play what and making new combinations of instruments, and that's a whole art form too. And so actually, the whole production of music is very broad, and currently there's very little work focused on music production or orchestration, or even, I would say, even arranging. And there's a lot more focus on can we write a pretty melody or something.
I have two questions. I'll get you first, and then three questions.
Well, I'm just saying, you have, when you're
Typically when you build a
Can you come
song,
up so you can hear you, so the boss can hear you?
so typically when you build a song, you're in the beginning you're always trying to start off with this. You're always trying to start off with a story. So then you're trying to tell a story through the song, and then you build it up, and just build it up until you get to the end of it. So with the AI, would it be building a story? Because if so, wouldn't it just be you're just teaching this this AI just a new language so that it can go and do its own thing? And if so, if you can teach it to do all of this stuff, why would we be focusing on the music aspect and not trying to get more suggestions for Netflix and trying to say like, you like Futurama, why don't you watch this too? But I digress. But still, when we're talking about music, we're talking about you have to learn a language, and whenever like you have a musician that's going through, the first thing you tell them, transcribe this, listen to this, and then get acclimated into this thing. But how would an AI be able to get acclimated to it if they don't really know the feeling? Because they know that when we listen to it, we know that there's something that once they hit a certain point, we know that, yeah, this is the crescendo, this is what we're actually listening for. But with AI, it's just saying, okay, I want to do this 2-5-1, and then I want to do this. And then would it I'll say, by trying to create something, do you think that if it happened to break these rules, that it may end up coming up, like say that there was a bug, and well, you know, like with a lot of like with jazz music, that music came about because we just like broke some rules. But what if there's like maybe a bug inside the AI? Would that happen just like help, you know, creating something a little bit better? Or I don't know.
Yeah, that's the point Bonds was making, that sometimes he breaks the rules in his music, and he adds randomization in his music. And you're really asking the question is how are you going to represent, how can the algorithms capture the emotion behind that's involved in the musical aspect of it? It's not just the creativity, but there's an emotional content, and will the algorithms be able to represent that?
Well, yeah, I think that's a great question, and this idea of connecting music to stories and narrative, I think it's actually even deeper than that. I think music is like a story, but I think there's something kind of going on in our mind that's even more abstract than stories. It's something about like adversity, or tension and release, something about expectations that we see in stories and we see in music. There might be something going on that's even deeper. So it's not like music is a form of a story. It's like music and stories are a form of something that's so deep we don't even have words for it. And I think there's almost no AI research that I've seen that approaches the problem like that, and I think that's one reason why we're seeing pretty shallow results from AI and automatic music generation. So I think we need, my opinion is we need a much deeper understanding of what's going on when we listen to music, and if we could understand that, then we would have a basis to start doing research towards making music automatically.
I'd like to say about the elephant in the room that nobody's mentioned. I've actually played gigs with me and my quartet on a computer using the Bandit thing. And I can tell you what it's like. It's like playing with really exceptional, good high school students. It's very good doing that. But once you get beyond that, it's lost. It doesn't know what to do.
Wow, yeah, but that's the whole point. So many times when we're comparing algorithms to musicians, we compare the algorithms to the best musicians. But what about comparing algorithms to mediocre musicians? You know, to good high school kids. For some folks, that's good enough. We don't need to listen to the best musicians. I don't have to have the best art. You know, and especially when I'm talking about functional music, music that is just, it has a social function, and I'm not necessarily talking about the artistic, music at the artistic end of things. I'm just talking about the functional things. So let me throw this out at you. Are we asking about maybe a music Turing test, right? And so in AI we have a Turing test that we want to give the computer, ask some questions and see how the computer performs and how it behaves, and to determine whether we think it's human enough. Do we need to have, or are we asking for that kind of thing across music production, across music creativity? We've got, what will it take if I have Roger Dannenberg is going to perform as a live musician, and next to him, he's going to have a AI that is going to be performing with him in a duet. What does it take for the audience to accept his artificial intelligence as an equal musician on terms? If they are performing together, will the audience see that AI is really just a tool that Roger is using, or are we at the point where the audience would accept the artificial intelligence just like it would accept a regular human musician? And if we're to that point, I think I think maybe our discussion is mute. Would you all? And again, I want to go back to the audience. If you like it, would you care whether it's AI or not? Would you just reject it simply because you found out it was artificial intelligence? Yes.
I say no, because a lot of times when we're listening to music, streaming or something, we don't know who's creating it or whatever. So we can have some artists, and you're like, oh my God, that sounds so good, and then you say it was a computer. Like, it's for real. Oh, that's sweet. But when it comes to live performance,
would you stop listening to it?
No, because what happens when you're having a live performance, the only thing that really matters is really your ear. If you're enjoying it, you're going to stay. But because you have so many people, they listening to DJs and all of that, or they're listening to something on the jukebox, and so they're in the place listening to the jukebox. It's in there. They're listening to it, and it's just nobody really performing anything, but they're enjoying it. But if you have a performer and something you have AI right next to it, and it sounds good to somebody, they'll stay and listen to it. But there's also the performance aspect that if you're going to, with performance, you also interact with people in the crowd. So if I'm performing and then someone say, play this one song, or play this, or you should say give me a key, and I start playing something for you. You have that social aspect that whenever you interact with the crowd, you can get that. The AI, it can't do that at the moment because they have to be trained. But with us, we can say, we can start playing, and then when we hear something, we can just change and go to a whole route where the AI is just stuck with that one thing. And so it really wouldn't matter
as long as you like it. Okay.
This is going to be an open question for the entire panel, but it seems like the popularization of music comes through two avenues. Either from what the quote-unquote underground, where it's a selective group of trendsetters who popularize it in the early stages, and therefore gets, people notice it, takes off, or a mass saturation of a market. Which approach do you think AI is going to take, AI music specifically, will take, considering there's probably going to be a lot of money developing the software, but at the same time it's going to be the more creative types of people who might just get it popularized because that's, I hate to put it in this terms, but the trendier thing to do nowadays?
Yeah, I think that this actually goes to the previous question on topic as well, about the story and whether you know who actually the composer is. And I think that the way AI music will become popular is through the current vectors and channels of music, and people will not even know that it's AI. And are we now sure that these summer hits are not actually AI? People don't know the composers, they don't care if they used Fruity Loops or whatever. And they actually don't know the story, as someone in the audience mentioned. They don't know the story behind the composition. They make a story for themselves when listening, and it could be a completely different story from the one that the composer intended. When I listened to Dvorak's New World Symphony, if I hadn't read that he was knowing the New World, I wouldn't have imagined this story. I had my own story. And so, yeah, I think the existing channels will be used to, if AI gets so good that it can produce delightful music for the masses, I think the existing channels will be used to just stream it in and nobody will actually know it's AI.
Right, and so look here, just following on what you just said, anytime someone comes out with something that's radically different, right, one group may call it garbage, okay, and the next group may like it. I recall when Prince, the musician, first came out. Wow, there was a whole generation of listeners that just thought that was absolute trash. And today he's celebrated as a musical genius. So if I have an algorithm that has produced something that one group does not like, right, but some group likes somewhere, that seems to be sufficient. So let me just challenge you here, our two panelists, because I think Boz is on the other side of you guys. Our two panelists that want to break music down. Well, can it be, can the AI create? Can it innovate? Can it improvise? Roger, you brought up earlier in your talk today, in the sense that with the sampling, trying to sample the music one note at a time, the real deal is capturing the idea of a phrase. And so we had someone in the audience that said, well, hey, as long as I like it, I don't care about the rest of the, when we get into the mechanics of what makes a musical genius, can he, does he know how to rest in the music at the right place? Does he know when to come in? Does he know when to come in loudly? Can the artificial intelligence tell when the crowd is hyped up and know when to start to contribute to the music? Well, maybe we're trying to decompose the process too much. And maybe it's just a matter of, well, you know what? A certain generation is going to like algorithmic music. And they're going to like it because they like it in its entirety, not because of how it was composed or how creative or how genius. And so maybe we're just the folks that are resisting the technological change. And that, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, 15 to 20 years from now, maybe algorithmic music will be the standard course of it.
Can I challenge in doing a synthesis of what it is that we've been discussing? I think that we are taking a polarization.
Yes.
We're talking about human-based as opposed to algorithmic-based or machine learning.
Yeah.
What I would like to synthesize is this. Roger brought up the fact that we need to do greater research in finding out that interface and how music actually impacts us, and that if we could do that and quantify that to a greater resolution, we would actually help the machine learning initiative to do a better job.
Yeah, but the problem with that is it's culturally relevant. Okay, so those things, the impact of music in India may make people in India feel one way. People in America may feel very differently about that. And let me go further. If you take that music and put it in a different time period, in the same country, it's going to be responded to differently. So if we do that research as far as what is motivating you at the music level, that deep thing, are you just capturing a snapshot, a sociological snapshot? And as soon as we're out of that generation, all of your research just goes out the door.
I think it's the opposite. I think that that a lot of current machine learning research, is based on different data sets, and they're not, so they're very culturally dependent or data set dependent, and they're not able to abstract what's really happening in music. And what I'm suggesting is if we could learn what's going on when we listen to music, I think that would be culturally independent.
So like at the cognitive, in our cognitive anatomy, what's going on there?
Yeah.
Deeper than the
Let me give
cultural.
you, like the most simple example is if I go, whoop, it makes people laugh. I mean, and this is cross-cultural.
Cross-cultural, is it also cross-time? So would it make me laugh in the 1500s? Or the 1200s?
We don't have empirical evidence of that.
And
We've only done studies of, for example, New England Conservatory music majors and Aborigines, and you get the same answer. And it's not only cross-cultural; it's actually cross-modal. You can ask people, it can be like a happy sound by pushing a pressure sensor, and you get the same pressure response. So there's something. So
there's some kind of cultural universalism.
That seems like there are actually some kind of emotional universals, and I think music also has some universals that we could study.
I was actually going to say something along those lines. I think you might have mentioned it a second ago, but I was going to say music is highly emotional. I think that we have to connect to the soul of whoever we're listening to. I believe that a lot of the music we're listening to that we fall in love with is because of who it's being delivered from. Like you said before, the story behind it, someone who suffered, some things that happened at Katrina. They wrote a song, and then people can identify with, they were saying the adversity, who those people were, what they bring to the song. We want to also fall in love with people. We want to hate the people that sing songs. We want the drama that goes behind songs and producing the songs and what happens around those songs. We want to get excited about what they wear and how they present themselves. You got a little kid that's listening to the music and say, I want to be like them when I grow up. It's more than just music. It's like that whole soul, person-to-person connection, empathy, excitement, romance. You're getting that, when you put that song on with that husband or that wife, you're not thinking about the person necessarily that's singing it, but it's that the fact that it's people. It's that whole people, that exchange. In addition to that, a lot of the music that we listen to is from YouTube. And so you get those millions of hits because I'm watching the performance. I'm watching that person that's wearing that outfit or they went through all that to get to where they are. I'm excited for them, and so I'm excited, and I want to also do that when I grow up. Or I want to do that. Can't wait till I go see those people in concert. Can't get that from AI.
Wow. So Boz, I think we're on the algorithm side, man. It seems like you're in that boat with me here. Is it possible for us to be able to capture context in our dimensions? This audience member talked about the drama that's involved. Why can't we capture with our data structures and with our cognitive structures and software? Why can't we capture drama? Why can't we capture context? Why can't we capture the notions of teen idol worship? And so give our AI a context, so in our knowledge representation, obviously there's a music component that we're going to talk about rules of music. We're going to talk about physical modeling algorithms. We're going to talk about a lot of things, but can't we also bring to bear to make it the music more dynamic and more live? Can't we capture cultural aspects with our knowledge representation schemes?
Well, at the moment, no. But but do we have all of the things that the lady listed? Well, most of them. They could be done even with an AI composer. And because the child idols, the drama, the live concerts, all of that, you could then do that with an algorithm composition. Of course, the drama and many of these things are on the side of the listener. And you could have a human performer, and many of the human stars and performers right now, they're not writing their own music. So what would be the difference?
That's right. That's right. But let me throw in. So if I come from a different place in artificial intelligence, instead of just the machine learning area where we are just looking at big data, we're doing supervised learning and unsupervised learning and clustering and all of these things. Instead of coming from that position, what if I come with model theory, and I come with ontologies, and I come with domain ontologies and task ontologies, and I have task ontologies and domain ontologies for the music area, and I have model theory that has represented, that is able to capture the concepts of excitement and the concepts of sadness, right? And so that's the kind of research that I do, where we are more model-driven than data-driven. Okay, so in that kind of AI, we try to use model theory a lot more to capture context. And what I'm suggesting is that maybe if we just combine some of the model theoretic approaches with the neural net and the data science approaches, we might get there a lot faster. So what she is referring to is the drama, the love and the hate. Maybe we have ways of representing this in computer technology.
Yeah, maybe, and this is one of the things that I've been wanting to research and study, but obviously didn't have the time. How do abstract musical ideas map to practical techniques and musical devices to actually reproduce it? So how do we capture the sadness, as you said, and how does it translate to music generation by generation, culture by culture, because it will be different.
And the big buzzword these days is there's a interdisciplinary approach. So a lot of the researchers are doing interdisciplinary things. And so we know there's chemistry involved. We know that, right? We know there is a sound theory involved, you know, a certain vibrations at a certain level and a certain decibel automatically invoke certain types of emotional things. So maybe the real issue is not so much that we don't have the technology to do it right now today. It's just that disciplines aren't getting together to talk about it, right? And so the chemists and the biologists and the psychologists and the music theorists and the algorithmic folks, when they get together, they'll be able to paint that picture. And sure, AI will replace us, and I think we might be fighting a losing battle here. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I would like to see a synergy between AI and human input. I would love to see artificial intelligence, which what it does best is learn from a human, if you will, a seed or an embryonic stage of development, and have that human being try to create that seed and then feed it to that algorithm and have that algorithm in all of its power and glory take that and do something with it that the human wouldn't be able to do.
So what would happen if Beethoven had access to
had
AI? You know, what work might he?
I'm looking at video game development. We look at procedural analysis, procedural generation. You know, so we're talking about being able to create on the fly over 500 billion planets types.
That's right.
So we're going to need music for each of those planets. So there's going to be a tie between the visual generation and the audio generation. We're not just talking about music, we're talking about sound effects, that type of thing. What if we can get the type of thing happening where AI does what it does best? If I'm playing a game using goggles, right? And it's aware of my head orientation and everything like that, so I can see in the goggles when I look up, which is basically nowadays, that's coming online very quickly. What if that set of goggles could measure my pupil dilation, my pulse, my respiration, and based on those physical predispositions, create a planet that's hot as opposed to cool, and music and sound effects that are related to that hot based on what I bring to the game. Now we're seeing a synergy between AI and what it would do really well. And
yeah, but you have expectations in this case. Any of you gamers, any gamers out here? So we got some gamers. Okay, anybody play Mass Effect Andromeda? So Mass Effect Andromeda was one of these games where it was supposed to be generating the planets in real time, right? So this game is supposed to be able to spontaneously, you're doing space travel, and the game is going to create autonomous environments. And what we're talking about here is being able to create the music to associate with those environments. But I can't help but think that you have these preconceived notions of what you think quality music will be. And I guess what I'm suggesting is that if I'm Microsoft, I'm going to throw together some, $2 artificial intelligence music. I'm going to slap it with this game, and these gamers out here are going to accept it. And they're going to, and not only that, they will grow. They're going to want to go out and buy the soundtrack for it. Yeah, because that's good, and it's good not because it's good to them. It's good because Microsoft said it's good, or because Sony said it's good, or because it's trending on Facebook for whatever reason. Right? So I don't know as far as AI taking our jobs. I don't think we have to wait until we get to the point where the artificial intelligence is as good as the human being, or as good as our best musicians. I just think it's a matter of marketing and time. Right? Boss, you agree with me here?
Absolutely. I also agree that it doesn't have to be the best human composer. It has to be the average composer. And with enough marketing, it can do that. Well, this has a little risk associated with it. Because as someone in the audience said, humans also like to compose, to express themselves in music rather than just listen. And there is a risk that if we replace the mediocre composers and everyone below, then nobody will actually go and try to improve themselves. Because even if you listen to the early works of great composers or see the early works of great painters, they're not that. They were still learning, they were experimenting. And if we take away that, somehow, then we might lose the genius that the AI could never reach. Obviously, nobody can stop humans from composing, even if there is mass-produced AI music. But if there is no financial benefit to that, maybe some of them might drop off. But then again, maybe they're not the genius ones.
I think one thing is that I agree with that general idea that AI-generated music is going to find applications like games and who knows what, and probably it will find these applications out of convenience more than raw talent, however whatever we call it. Maybe the good news is it's going to be really hard to force people to listen to AI-generated music. If they don't want to hear it, there are millions and millions of options, and so the same computers that might be generating, bringing us unlimited supplies of mediocre music, they're also generating or providing to us almost unlimited supplies of music by geniuses and emerging geniuses around the world through internet and YouTube and all of these new distribution mechanisms. So I don't know, it's one thing to keep in mind.
So something that I jotted down is that we're worried about AI like making better quality music, but like better music is like subjective and opinion. We're like talking about better as in like more trending. Like I personally get a slight distaste when I find a song is popular. Like I try to avoid what's trending and such, because I get like let down by trends, like not in music, but like when I hear Flappy Bird, or if it's like I'm tired of children singing Let It Go, like sometimes I'm tired of what's actually popular, and it's time to find like a small community of like some other artist. Like some people would still stick to traditional music making methods, and a smaller community tends to like be more positive. And in forms of entertainment, such as TV shows, like when it's stretched, like have that small community, then like when it becomes more popular, you like get people that like consider it garbage because it's popular, and then you have the over-defensive elitists that want to defend the show so much, and then the community becomes negative. So sometimes I actually like the smaller, more lesser-known areas.
Okay, so you're in that Rage Against the Machine a group that, well, once it becomes too popular, that's what happened to MySpace, right? That became really popular, and people wanted to do Facebook instead of MySpace, right? So once the, if the AI music was to get really, really popular, that would in and of itself cause some people just to go the other way, right, for sure. But I guess I have to ask, in these digital web environments, you don't know who the artist is half the time anyway. You're downloading songs, I just like it, I don't like it, and I click on a little bit of text, if I like the text, or if I like the avatar, or the emoji. I don't even have to see a human being involved. I just like the emoji, and I like the sound, and I guess I don't think we're going to escape from that. And for my scientists here, you guys, we all acknowledge the fact that algorithms are making scientific breakthroughs, right? That is now something that has happened where in fields of, I'll give you for instance, in synthetic chemistry, some of those algorithms are making true, legitimate scientific breakthroughs. And if they can make scientific breakthroughs that require innovation, creativity, insight, and all of these things, why won't we have the possibility of music genius doing the same exact thing that's happening on the science side?
Well, I think that's a possibility. I think we have a long way.
But it's far off.
Yeah, I think we have a long way to go.
So
I also just wanted to throw in that if you're attracted to music that doesn't have the masses following it, please listen to my music.
So do we have any other questions? We're probably close to our time here. Okay, I want to thank the panelists. Can we get one more question here? Come on up.
As the gentleman was basically talking about conforming to the non-conformists there, I think it's something that we all tend to really know.
Or if the one artificial intelligence program generates a piece of music. 20 years ago, we suppose this music was composed 20 years ago, and the programmer was Mr. A, we suppose. So 20 years later, this company was transferred to another. But this program composed the music, which is very popular and it's ranked very high level on the Billboard. So how do we? Is there any protocol to negotiate that kind of problem? Thanks.
Wow. So if the program that composed the music that was very popular on the chart ends up, that company gets bought by someone else, right? So you're asking like a digital rights management. Who, you know, how we're going to deal with, you know, who owns the royalties? Who owns the money at the end of the day when it's artificial intelligence that is generating the successful, trending, you know, on the top of the Billboard charts? Who's it belong to? Especially if the company has changed hands. Are they going to be selling AIs from one company to the next?
Well,
you know.
So I mean, so far, programs are not legal entities. They have owners, and whatever a program generates would fall either under some license agreement, or would be the creator would probably be the person that, you know, that pushed the run button.
So it's kind of like the publisher owns it all.
Yeah, so I think it's actually pretty straightforward, because you know, if it's commercial, if it's non-commercial, then the creator of the program owns the program and the output, unless they distribute it with some license that allows other people to use it. I guess the only problem would be if you know, if maybe there's a creator of the program and a purchaser, user of the program, and the creator of the program says, I own it, and the user says, well, I turned the knobs and I ran the program, so it's mine. And I think if there were, you know, if the license agreements were unclear, there obviously could be a dispute. But generally, like even if you buy a sample library, you know, there's the same kind of question. Do the samples belong to the people that created the samples? Do they belong to the original musicians? Do they belong to me because I purchased a sample library, and if I write music with that, I want to own the music? And all of that is clarified in licenses. Like you wouldn't buy a sample library unless it came with a license and said, I'm going to own the music.
Let me extend this question a little bit more. Okay, what about if that music won the Grammy, right? So does the Grammy go to the AI, or does it go to the individual who owns the AI, right? So
there are plenty of like Oscar winners for technical achievements and Grammy and things for well, yeah, and Grammys too for technologies, but they go to people. So I think if an AI wrote a Grammy award-winning song, the person that created the program would be awarded a Grammy for a technical contribution.
Oh, that's no fair. I see the AI, I see those artificial intelligence forming a union, right? And they're gonna want to be paid for what they do.
Well,
right?
when that happens, we're
well, if the AI is actually creating something new, right, and it's new, and it's not just a function of programming, it's dynamic and spontaneous. Right, well that gets us into another thing. We want to, we're at the end here. We've had a lot of fun. First, let's give our panelists a hand. Very much. I don't know if we solved the problem or not, but hopefully you all will think about it. Okay, whether you, I think some people in the audience already made up their mind whether they would accept artificial intelligence music. But please keep this in mind that I think Boz made the case. I tried to make it. You guys, we're not just want to pick on you. But I think this artificial intelligence is going to replace the average musician in a lot of different contexts. And what will that mean for the average musician trying to make a living? Right? You know, the guy that might make elevator music, you know, or grocery store music, or you know, he's composing a new Happy Birthday song. You know, if the artificial intelligence is making it, how do those people survive? Obviously, the best of our artists are not going to be replaced, but a lot of mediocre artists will be replaced, and poor ones will get replaced before they have opportunity to become good. Right? Because the AI is going to start out better than a bad musician.
So my short answer is the recording industry already put 90% of musicians out of work
That's right.
already, and so, you know, it doesn't really matter.
So if we find good musicians, we want to support them. That's that at the end of the day. Hey, thanks, Boz. Thank you guys. This was great. All of this stuff is going to end up. This stuff is all going to end up. We're trying to record it, and we're going to try to get it in the ACM digital library. And so hopefully, yeah, you know, you'll see this whole interview and panel discussion. Sure, I'm going to post it on YouTube, and we will try to get it in the digital library as well.